You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
Bear with me here, but it is a little funny trying to talk about images on an audio-only podcast. But today, the European Space Agency released the very first images from its Euclid telescope. And pro tip for today, be sure to look up the first Euclid images because they are dazzling. The colorful Horsehead Nebula looks so incredible as seen by Euclid. And amazing to think that in just 1 year, we've had new images from Webb and now also Euclid that are showing the beauty and wonder of the universe in a new light.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy.
Today is November 7th, 2023. I'm Maria Varmazis, and this is T-minus. ESA member states adopt the first zero-debris charter. ESA also releases first images from Euclid. Space Forge gets new funding from the UK's MOD. And our guest today is Dr. Annika Rollock, Director of Engineering at the Aurelia Institute, on their space architecture trade study. Stay with us for the second part of our show for that chat. On to today's intelligence briefing. During the opening day of the European Space Summit, ministers representing ESA member states, associate states, and cooperating states adopted the world's first zero-debris charter, and they agreed to continue to strengthen ties to, quote, unlock the full potential of space for the benefit of Europe and its citizens. ESA's new internal standard plans to significantly limit the production of debris in Earth and lunar orbits by 2030 for all of the agency's future missions, programs, and activities. The Zero Debris Charter is a global initiative for all space entities to sign and follow towards the shared goal of a zero-debris future. ESA Director General Joseph Aschbacher released a statement following the new charter's release saying this: as space infrastructure has become the backbone of our modern society, the proliferation of space debris is threatening our way of life. Now is the time to act as a community to channel our collective efforts. To implement the Zero Debris Charter, ESA will focus on developing groundbreaking technologies for satellite end-of-life disposal, in-orbit servicing, and active debris removal. In addition, ESA will work hand-in-hand with institutions in charge of regulatory aspects. The 2023 Space Summit in Seville marks the opening of the period of registration of intent to sign the Zero Debris Charter. And it's the images us space nerds have been waiting for. The European Space Agency has shared the first pictures captured by Euclid. ESA claims that never before has a telescope been able to create such razor-sharp astronomical images across such a large patch of the sky and looking so far into the distant universe. The 5 images released illustrate Euclid's full potential. They show that the telescope is ready to create the most extensive 3D map of the universe yet, to uncover some of its hidden secrets. And of course, we've included a link to the pictures in our show notes and on our LinkedIn page, and you follow us there, right? Anyway, we've got links for you so you can lose yourself in the stars. I know I will. And as we mentioned on yesterday's show, a new agreement on space launches between France, Germany, and Italy has secured funding for 42 launches of the delayed Ariane 6 and a return to service for Italy's grounded Vega C. According to France's finance minister, the deal between the 3 European nations also clarifies usage of the European spaceport in French Guiana and opens up competition to future launchers. The deal provides for up to $365 million of public support for Ariane 6 from 2026 to address soaring costs and calls on industry to reduce its own costs by 11%. Ireland's first satellite is due to be launched later this month. The educational Irish research satellite 1, known as IRSat-1, is slated for launch on 29th of November on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. IRSat-1 was built by students from the University College Dublin under the framework of the European Space Agency Academy's Fly Your Satellite program. The project began in 2017 when the team's proposal to build a CubeSat to perform gamma-ray astronomy was accepted as part of the second cycle of the program. UK in-space manufacturing company Spaceforge has been awarded about £500,000 as part of a collaborative project with Northrop Grumman under the Ministry of Defense's Defense Technology Exploitation program. The funding is designed to support small and medium-sized enterprises across the UK to develop innovative materials, technologies, and processes to enhance defense supply chains. Spaceforge, which is based in Wales, is building the world's first in-space manufacturing platform that can be returned back to Earth. The United Launch Alliance, a joint Lockheed Martin and Boeing company, says their new Vulcan rocket is beginning final processing milestones in advance of the inaugural launch. The first certification mission is planned to launch on Christmas Eve from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And there's news today that we may have just witnessed our first act of conflict in space. The Telegraph is reporting that Israel's Arrow missile defense system took out a rocket fired from Houthi rebels in Yemen outside of Earth's atmosphere. The ballistic missile was reportedly fired over 1,000 kilometers away in Yemen. Further details are scarce at the moment, but we will, of course, keep an eye on the news sources for you. And on a much happier note, the inaugural Maine Space Conference wrapped up this morning in Portland, Maine. And Maine is planning a new space complex that includes a space data and advanced analytics center, an R&D innovation hub, and horizontal and vertical launch sites. The event itself drew over 300 attendees, which happily surprised the expectations of the conference organizers. And this attendance reflected both the strong potential and enthusiasm for increased space education, business, and infrastructure in Maine, said Terry Shahada, Executive Director of the Maine Space Grant.
So at the end of August, we had about 75 people registered. We were hoping to get about 150, maybe 200 at the outset. We had a meeting with Peter Van Allen, who's the editor of New Business, and don't worry about that. Apparently, as a result of COVID or something related to that, people started registering towards the end. And in fact, that just happened. I use the image of a counter that goes slow and then it kind of turns really quickly to the point where you can't even see what the numbers are. That's exactly what happened to us. And that shows, I think, the interest that Maine has. Whether you're indifferent or you're very positive about it, it does show the interest that Maine really wants to get into the space economy. We have a lot of people who are professionals, space professionals, educators who K through 12, higher educator, business people, and students.
Many attendees were local to Maine, and their enthusiasm for a growing space economy in the state is both business and personal. A deep interest in space, an enthusiasm for insights from space-based data and technology, and a desire to grow employment opportunities in the state and to be involved in humanity's future in space without having to relocate across the country or beyond. And many times throughout the conference, speakers would address what they knew, what many people, perhaps even you, are thinking. Why does space make sense in Maine? Well, the pitch is this. With its educated workforce and strong manufacturing base, the state is also geographically a prime location for launch. The only state on the U.S. East Coast with a lower population density and a south-facing coastline. And with commercial space only picking up pace and launch capacity an increasing concern, many representatives from government, academia, and industry alike said the time is right to get into alignment and work on bringing new opportunities to grow the space economy in Maine. In a standing room-only opening session, Mike Forcappa, who is the Director of Business Development and Marketing for Spirit Aerosystems, really summed it up best.
Maine has a long and proud history in the space industry. The future of the Maine space industry is very bright, and is now the perfect time for us to collectively make great things happen.
And that concludes our intelligence briefing for today. You'll find links to further reading on all the headlines we've mentioned in our show notes. We've even added a piece on China's mystery satellite and a Bloomberg piece claiming that SpaceX is aiming for $15 billion in sales next year. All these stories and more at space.n2k.com. Hey T-Minus crew, if you're just joining us, welcome! And be sure to follow T-Minus Space Daily in your favorite podcast app. And if you could do us a favor, share the intel with your friends and coworkers. So here's a little challenge for you. By Friday, please show 3 friends or coworkers this podcast. A growing audience is the most important thing for us, and we would love your help as part of the T-Minus crew. If you find T-Minus useful, and of course we certainly hope that you do, please share it so other professionals like you can find the show. Thank you so much for your support. It means a lot to me and to all of us here at T-Minus.
And now a word from our sponsor, 6 Sense. 6 Sense provides award-winning cloud-based automated endpoint and vulnerability management solutions to streamline IT and security operations. With its advanced platform, businesses gain complete visibility and control over their infrastructure, reducing IT and security risks and optimizing operational efficiency. With 6 Sense, you'll get real-time alerts, risk-based vulnerability prioritization and remediations, and an intuitive automation and orchestration engine so you can focus on your core business goals, confident in the knowledge that your enterprise is secure, compliant, and running smoothly. Visit 6sense.com to learn why enterprises choose them.
Our guest today is Dr. Annika Rollock, Director of Engineering at the Aurelia Institute, and she's speaking with us today on their Space Architecture Trade Study.
So my name is Annika Rollock. I am the Director of Engineering at the Aurelia Institute, which is a nonprofit dedicated to basically expanding humanity and our mission in space. As a Director of Engineering, I'm focusing on designing space habitats and really outlining the technology roadmap for what it would take to make large-scale space habitats happen.
I would love to know your story about how you got into this. This is such a cool area to be studying.
Yeah, so I kind of first got exposed to human spaceflight during my undergraduate work at MIT, where we did a lot of kind of human factors research. And so it was looking into how humans work with maybe robotic agents to do maintenance or different kind of human robotic control in space. And then I kind of meandered my way to graduate school, and I happened to land at the University of Colorado Boulder, SCO-Buffs, and we have a huge bioastronautics department there. And Lem was lucky enough to work with David Klaus there, who teaches the Space Habitat Design class, which is a whole class dedicated to space architecture, space habitats, basically how do we design a spacecraft capable of maintaining human life. And so through that work and kind of through the community, I also was introduced to Dr. Ariel Ekbla, our CEO of Aurelia, And she was tackling this problem from a space architecture lens. And so really looking at not only how do we keep humans alive at the bare minimum in space, but how do we do this in a way that is inspiring and brings joy and fulfillment in space in like a futuristic sense? And how do we do this in a way that's accessible, in a way that's beautiful sometimes, in a way that really brings joy and whimsy to it, but also in a just better, more fulfilled way of living than just kind of like sticking humans at a tube and calling it a day.
Just get a module up there and just good luck, everybody. Yeah. I love that. And we are at such a fascinating time in terms of human space exploration where we are thinking about these things really seriously, and we know that that's coming. It's coming next, especially as the ISS is starting to near the end of its useful life. I always feel a little sad saying that, but still, it's a very exciting time. So one of the things that brings you here today is the Space Architecture Trade Study, which is such fun reading for me. Could you tell our listeners what this is, please?
Yeah, so Space Architecture Trade Study actually spun out of some of my intern work with Aurelia, which I did towards the end of my PhD. And the focus of it was basically doing a broad literature deep dive into what types of concepts in space architecture are out there. And we tried not to limit ourselves, so we looked at concepts that have actually flown, so starting, with Vostok and Mercury and Gemini, and then moving on to look at kind of the modern concepts that are underway, like things like orbital reef, the life habitat, concepts from Airbus and vast space, and then also trying to look at things from science fiction. So taking in things from utopias, not dystopias. That's kind of part of our optimistic mission. Yeah. So like Star Trek and things like that, and trying to make sure that they're somewhat plausible or inspiring in some way, not just kind of like we didn't include a Death Star, for example. Like that's not the future we want.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the O'Neill Tunnel in there just made me go yes, because they're really cool. So, what were the takeaways from looking at all these different habitats?
Some of the takeaways were that the first one was that some of these concepts are very hard to find. There's so much out there from trade studies that happened at NASA kind of over the years from different groups that have done academic work on different concepts. And so really trying to coalesce those was just like the first hurdle, because people in the space community, when we presented this work at conferences, have expressed just like joy that this exists now, because there's concepts that have kind of gotten lost to the sands of time. And so that was one takeaway, is just the fact that this exists is a much needed thing in the community. So people know what we've done. And then in the micro level, kind of zooming in on the takeaways, there's a clear gap on 3 levels. So there are the concepts that we have flown, and oftentimes these are, the cheapest, the lightest, the things that get the job done. ISS is great, but it is a tube attached to other tubes. And if you've seen the inside of it, it's kind of like living in a lab space. And so it can be a little bit grating on the astronauts over time, and not something that you'd want to live it in full time as, maybe your home. They make it at home, but it's the part of their jobs as well. And so that's kind of the first gap, is there's stuff that we've flown. And then there are these concepts that we have looked at over time, like things like artificial gravity, these bigger surface level settlements, these more modular, large scale orbital things like concepts like von Braun has thought about, other concepts like the O'Neill cylinder, Bernal sphere, these huge like settlement or, population, civilization size things, and really the way the imagination has gone. And then there's kind of that even farther level. I'd put maybe the O'Neill cylinder and Bernal sphere at that level, but things like Star Trek level things.
Yeah,
like Deep
total
Space Nine.
dreams. Yeah.
And as you get farther out, there's like these different levels of gaps between those. And so trying to tease out what are technological gaps, what are kind of like paradigm shifting gaps, and how would we actually design a roadmap starting to angle towards some of these concepts. Like, what do we need to do to make artificial gravity happen at scale? What do we need to do to enable these polyolithic, large-scale structures in space in a feasible way, in a way that brings down launch costs, and in a way that actually is designed and thoughtful and not just kind of a pie in the sky?
Do we have answers to any of those questions yet? Like, do you have proposals on how we can get that next step in the very long road to something really amazing, maybe way in the future?
Some of the kind of takeaways from that were people love artificial gravity. It's really important because, it obviously mitigates and is a countermeasure for a lot of the physiological effects of spaceflight, especially for deep space. And so finding ways to build structures large enough to spin in ways that don't make people sick, and then also control those structures as they're spinning. That's, one specific kind of bucket of research. So the, attitude control, the navigation and control of systems like that, the structural design of systems like that. And then actually an interesting thing that came out was bioregenerative life support. So if we're thinking on the civilization scale, how do we make closed loop systems that are not just chemical-based life support, looking into things like algae, looking into things like plants, because plants are obviously they take in carbon dioxide and they produce oxygen, but they also create joy for people. One of my favorite space station experiments was the zinnia flower experiment.
Me too. I was just thinking that as you were saying it. I love that picture of the zinnia just sort of floating in front of the cupola.
So bringing joy to the astronauts who want to take care of plants, and then also just flavor. So one of the side effects of space is that you basically are congested because of the fluid imbalances shifting in your body. And so astronauts love spicy food. And so thinking about what are the actual plants that bring joy or flavor to life in a kind of a long duration spaceflight environment.
How do we build that in as we look ahead? Because there are such practical considerations, like the tube in space is because it seemed like all we could afford to get up there, right? So how do we get to a place where we can have the niceties as opposed to just the bare functionality?
Part of our research involves actually self-assembling space structures. This came out of Ariel's PhD thesis, and we've had a few zero-G flights and one ISS flight and potentially another one coming up to test out this self-assembling tile concept. So imagine launching a Pringles can of tiles that then can self-assemble in space into a soccer ball or buckyball shape. The technical term is a truncated icosahedron, which is a lot of syllables, but...
We all know buckyball. We've all had those, so yeah.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. And so the idea of that is that you can basically launch something that would stack and compact really well in a launch vehicle and assemble to something that has a huge, more than half of the habitable volume of the ISS in one or 1.5 launches, which is, would be a huge different volume, not just these tubular axial directions, but a spherical direction. So you could fill the space and have these kind of different geometric living spaces than we've dealt with before.
So yeah, I guess the question I get, maybe more of a call to action for folks who are listening, is what would you like to see people do with this information? Like what should they take away from it when they go back to their jobs?
Yeah, so I would love to, if people could look over the table, if you have any suggestions or additions you'd like to see on there, definitely just submit them. We love getting concepts. And then also looking, if you're a designer, a space architect, or if you're designing for people in space, look through the concepts and see if anything fits the scale of what you're looking at. Draw inspiration from it. I think that, it's really the standing on the shoulders of giants thing, where if we know what we've done before, it'll more easily equip us to be creative and design for the future. So maybe draw inspiration from it, kind of see what's been done. That's what I would encourage, at least.
We'll be right back.
Now, a word from our sponsor, the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. Study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the National Science Foundation's CyberCore Scholarship for Service program, which covers tuition and a $6,000 annual professional development allowance, as well as providing a $37,000 additional annual stipend. Apply for the scholarship and the fall semester by March 1st. Learn more at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI.
Welcome back. Now, let's get into one of the peak nerd arguments in space. Worm or meatball? Okay. Worm is the NASA logo type, the all-red space AG rounded edge 4 letters of NASA, bold, clean, and remarkable in its simplicity. Meatball, on the other hand, is the NASA insignia. It's the OG symbol for NASA, the white stars on a blue circle backdrop with the red vector diagonally across the white NASA letters and an orbital path all in white. The NASA Worm logotype was created in the mid-1970s by Richard Danny and Bruce Blackburn. The worm was retired from use rather unceremoniously in 1992 and relegated to the historical dustbin. And that's the symbol of NASA from the 70s and 80s in the minds of many, isn't it? But then, a few years ago, that worm was brought out of the dustbin and dusted off for Artemis, and oh yeah, it's so back. And as part of the worm's triumphant return, Richard Danny was honored at NASA yesterday, where Danny was given a NASA Exceptional Public Achievement Medal for his work. And following those honors, he was part of a discussion panel on the worm's impact on the world of design and in pop culture. And designer Michael Barut reflected on the worm's creation when he first saw it as a design student when it was first unveiled in the 70s.
Design students in those days felt that they were enlisting in this great cause, which was to modernize the world, to kind of blow the dust off the way it existed before, and to kind of take it forward into an optimistic, second half of the 20th and indeed in the 21st century. And this symbol was a beautiful demonstration of what that might look like. And so I would say from the minute I saw it, I understood all those things that it was meant to represent. Even things that, like, I think, like a normal person like my mom, who was a housewife, might say, well, why aren't there horizontal lines making those A's? And I would have said, well, Mom, that's supposed to look like the nose cone of a rocket ship, It's modern. It's like one sleek path, right? And it also, in retrospect, I realized that it has this amazing other characteristic, which is that, to put it very simply, a 4-year-old can draw it. And if you're talking about seizing the imagination of the next generation, the generation after that sort of capacity to sort of inculcate them in the excitement and to reduce it to a simple shape like that is just really thrilling. I'm not surprised that someone like news people liked it because it's just so visible and dramatic. In my business, sometimes we'll do some design and say, this is great, you'll be able to see it from a million miles away. You don't have to see many logos from a million miles away. You have to see this logo from a million miles away. And so, it just seemed like a unmitigated triumph to me at the time. And I wasn't all surprised at the way it seized people's imagination.
Next time you find yourself outside NASA HQ in Washington, D.C., there's worm sign. #unintentional Dune reference. The, in my opinion, awesome and beautiful NASA worm logo type is now proudly, big and bold, a monument right outside NASA HQ's doors. And I should note, you don't even need to choose worm or meatball, as nowadays NASA happily uses both the worm and the meatball all over the place. But despite what you may have seen or read on the internet, they have not yet signed off on the combination of the two, the worm ball or the meatworm. No, absolutely not. That's it for T- for November 7th, 2023. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like T- are part of the daily routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth, mixing by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Brandon Karp. And I'm Maria Varmazes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.